What does it actually mean to be Black enough? Is it about skin tone, culture, politics, family history, or the way society decides to categorize you? Today on The Roots Matter, I am joined by my friend Bryce for a conversation that digs into a complicated and often uncomfortable topic: how Black identity is defined, policed, and politicized. We're looking at a video from a biracial man who phenotypically presents as white, yet openly embraces his Black family, heritage, and the historical legacy they're connected to. That raises a lot of questions. Who gets to define Blackness? How do social expectations shape the way people perform or reject identity? And how has political and cultural indoctrination influenced the way people think about race in the first place? This isn't about gatekeeping identity. It's about unpacking the assumptions behind it. So let's get into it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Roots Matter. I have a wonderful special guest with me. How you doing, Bryce?
I'm good. How are you doing? It's good talking to you again, Cynthia.
Yeah,
Been a minute.
likewise. Yeah, it has been a minute. Backstory, guys, like we've actually done a few live streams together in the past. We talked about a wide variety of topics um, concerning politics, race, atheism, and even how like those things intersect as well.
Yeah.
And we have a video that we were going to provide some commentary that Bryce actually sent to me. And I thought it was going to be a really interesting conversation to have, especially when we're talking about today. So let us go ahead and get that up and running.
Being a biracial person who is white presenting is a really interesting experience because I always get the same question: how Black are you? And when I get that question, I never really know how to answer it because I know that somebody is looking for a definite percentage or number. And obviously, looking at me, I look like a white guy. And if you're asking about my DNA percentage, of course it's low. Look at me. I phenotypically look like a white person. But answering in that way completely negates my history, my family's history. So a little bit of background about my personal family history. I am a descendant of one of the first registered interracial marriages in America. I'm still learning about this, but it was a marriage between a freed slave named Gould and a slave owner's daughter. I believe her name was Elizabeth. And that happened in the 1600s. They started a family, and that family has been light-skinned for a very long time because of the interracialness. But this brings up a really interesting point, which is my dad, who is the son of two very prominent Black history figures. My grandfather, my dad's dad, was a mechanic in the Tuskegee Airmen. My grandmother, my dad's mom, was one of the first African-American female police officers in the United States. The US government didn't care about their light-skinned skin tone. They were Black. Now, I didn't grow up with my grandparents. They died before I was born. But my dad raised me to be very proud of my family lineage and to be a very proud interracial, biracial person. He taught me about how to handle myself if somebody were to call me the N-word. He taught me about how to handle myself around police officers at an extremely young age. But growing up, I would always get the same question, which is, how Black are you? And I'm not unique in this fact. My dad, who grew up at the tail end of segregation, also went through the similar type of thing. He told me about times he was walking to elementary school and he was beat up by the white kids on the way there and beat up by the Black kids on the way home. And finally, one of his cousins protected him and say, "Y'all, why are you beating up Butch? He's Black." And they were like, "Oh, interesting. We didn't know." And then fast forward to me. An acquaintance of mine asked me, "Where is my hair from?" And I told him that it's Black. And he said, "No, not the color of your hair. Like, what ethnicity are you? Is it?" I told him that I'm biracial, and he was like, "What are you talking about?" But the reason I bring this up is because it is an interesting thing to be in to talk about. And it's scary and it's hard because People have opinions about it. When I have children, if I am to have children, I am going to tell them and teach them about our family history. I know that their skin color will be light. But does that take away their family heritage? Does that take away their bits of blackness? I invite you to have some discourse with me, because I know that this is hard, but I'm willing and wanting to talk to you about it. Anyways, I'll talk to you later.
So
Yeah.
I would like to get your thoughts first. Like when you first like came across this video, what were you thinking?
Well, my initial reaction whenever I see someone discussing um, anything to do with the definition of blackness, what does it mean to be black? That piques my curiosity because one thing I've learned in my adulthood is race is a social construct
Mm-hmm.
and it means different things to different people. And the definition of what one race is changes from culture to culture, from society to society. This is something I didn't know growing up, but I found out through the course of just meeting different people and talking to different people. And even the concept of blackness is somewhat subjective. And I found that that is a generational thing as well.
Mm.
When I grew up, kind of like what he was saying in the video, if you were, I mean, they always harken back to the olden days, you know, back in the olden days, back in the slave days, if you were 80% black, you were black, you know,
Right, right.
and especially if you weren't passing, which I'll get to in a second. But, you know, if you were, it didn't matter if you were light skinned, dark skinned, whatever your hair looked like, if you didn't look white, like if you weren't passing as white and you had any black ancestry, you were black. That's
Yeah.
just how it was. That's how they, you know, treated you. And if you were biracial, they used to call it mulatto. You know,
Right.
if you were like
Mm-hmm.
half black and half white, you were a mulatto. And that was by law, you were a slave. Mulattoes
Mm-hmm.
were still slaves. You know, you had to
Right.
be less than half black to even be considered something more. But still, that didn't even necessarily count in, you know, in like the segregation days, you know. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so what he's saying was very interesting to me because he is someone who I would consider white passing.
Yes. Yes.
Um, but at the same time, I could see someone asking him about his ethnicity. I mean, you know, your hair is, you have curly hair. Where does your hair, you know, what is your background? And if he says the truth, he's going to say, well, you know, I've got black in me. That's why my hair's like this. And that's going to raise the conversation. So it's an interesting conversation. I find that there's a lot of divide about whether he should be considered black or not, and it's
Mm-hmm.
generational. The older generations I talk to, people my age and older,
Yeah.
no hesitation. Yeah, he's black. He identified as black. He knows his black ancestry. He has black DNA, and he would have been considered that back in the day, you know,
Right.
unless he was passing. Younger
Yeah.
generation, not so much. No, he's not black. He doesn't look black. He hasn't lived the black experience. He hasn't been targeted because of his color. He doesn't get to claim blackness, you know? So there's a divide there between the generations, and I think it has to do with how different black people conceive of what blackness means to them and their knowledge of the history of how blackness was treated in America, at least. I'm doing this from a very US centric
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah. It's and it makes sense for any of us when we start having these conversations about what does it mean to be a black person in America, yet you still have an identity that's not black too,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
How do you how do you kind of like navigate through life, even in how we are in the United States and of itself, because we are very racially conscious, right? I mean, for Pete's
Yes, we
sake,
are.
race was born here. Like race, what the social construct of race was invented right here in the Americas through law.
Yeah. Right.
So how even though like there have been like you know um concepts of what that would be before America became a nation or even became a colony here, um there's still the idea of race being intrinsically American, and
Mhm.
especially how it's looked at and shaped here. It's like we taught the United States itself taught the world how to view race. You know,
Yeah, I would say it's not necessarily the United States. I would say it's the British colonizers of the
sure,
United
yeah,
States,
yeah, yeah,
because like you said, the United States didn't start until 1765, but
right,
the colonizers had already identified these people as black, these
yeah,
slaves as black in what would become the United States of America. So it
hmm
wasn't American in the sense that the United States of America invented it. It was the British colonizers who
who were
landed
in
in the
America
United
that
States
invented it.
who
Yeah,
right.
yeah. I
So
mean, yeah, because we really didn't see like the laws show up on in like organized colonies like in Virginia until like the 1680s. Like before, everyone was categorized by whatever nation you came from.
right,
And we know that here, specifically in America, when you had the colonizers come from the British Isles, it was always about being a English Christian man. That's how
Protestant
Protestant,
Christian.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
Protestant, yes, yes,
yeah.
we're not that dirty Catholics now,
No, yes, yeah,
but yeah, so that's what it was, and then until like the 1680s when you start to see these particular ideas to separate the idea of nationhood versus skin color to create
mhm,
race. This is what we see, and a lot of it, had to do with changing the labor force from indentured servitude to slavery. But that's a different video. So now we are here, and there's
mhm.
and let's and of course, like yes, there has been always biracial, multiracial people that have lived here, lived in other parts of the world, and how and their lived experiences are very indicative to their environment, right?
Yeah,
And I know that um even though like I'm not biracial, I'm still multicultured because I am a daughter of an immigrant.
mhm.
So I have a unique perspective on how blackness even shows up for me, especially since my blackness is not completely defined by being in America, right?
Right.
Um, and I can imagine like when he was talking about like, yeah, phenotypically I am presenting this way.
Mhm.
However, I'm a person who was taught about my family lineage and my heritage and I would definitely say from the things that he talked about is it's something to be embraced and be proud of. Especially when he was talking about like how one of his relatives served in World War II. It was one of like a mechanic for the Tuskegee Airmen,
Yeah,
and we even know like now the this administration even took for a while. I don't know if it's back up on the website,
I think it
but
is. They
okay,
tried
good.
to get rid of it. They tried to
Yeah,
get the Air Force to stop teaching about the Tuskegee Airmen, which
yeah.
I think it lasted for like 1 or 2 days,
Mm,
maybe a week, while the Air Force had to review it because it was
mm-hmm.
DEI,
Right,
right?
right, right, right.
But no, this has been Air Force history since day one. I used to be in the Air Force, by the way. I'm a 21-year Air Force retiree, in case
Mm.
anybody is just learning. So I know a lot about the Air Force. I'm on an Air Force base right now, so I'm still affiliated.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Tuskegee Airmen is a huge part of not only American history, Air Force history, but just the racial history. The military was once segregated,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a short period of time where desegregation was signed into, well, it wasn't signed into law, but through executive order.
Right.
you know uh Black people had to serve in white units, and that was a big deal at the time. But I don't want to take the attention away from that. The fact that this gentleman in the video, he's proud of his heritage because it was taught to him. And so, what is he supposed to say? you know Nothing about the Tuskegee Airmen, nothing about his grandparents, nothing about the fact that, he can link his ancestry to slaves. Is he supposed to pretend that that's not real because some people don't see blackness when they look at him?
Yeah.
But other people see something, why's your hair like that? Where do you come from? Like, wait, is he supposed to lie? It doesn't make any sense unless he can say, yeah, I have black ancestry,
Right.
Whether that means he's identifying as black, I don't know. If he does, I don't have a problem with it. If he doesn't, I don't have a problem with that either. That's the thing about being biracial and passing. You can sort of go either way. It kind of depends on how strongly your ties are, in my opinion, with the black community. If you were raised in that kind of environment where that was the mindset, versus, you could have been raised with your mostly white family in Kansas and they didn't teach you about what to say to the cops when you get pulled over,
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So.
And it seemed like that when he was talking about like his familial history, that
Mhm.
those are types of conversations that he had growing up as well, and it may not have been as pervasive, maybe if he was phenotypically more black presenting, right?
Mhm. Well, it would have been
Yet,
non-controversial if he was darker. It's
yeah.
like the reason to have that conversation is obvious when you have dark skin,
Oh yeah, most definitely. Exactly.
Yeah.
Because like, that conversation comes like, hey, you are going to be profiled and this is why and this is what's going to happen and this is what you need to do in order for you to make sure that you leave that situation alive, right? We
Right.
all I know that I've had that conversation. I'm pretty sure you've had that conversation. Like, it's something that, maybe some of our, white counterparts majority of times they don't have that conversation or they're not familiar with that conversation until maybe somebody that's black presenting or tells them about it, right?
Yeah.
um
In my
but
case, it's interesting because
yeah.
I had not had that conversation was not had to me when I was younger, but I
Mm,
think that has more to do with the fact that number one, I grew up in New York. I'm from Queens,
mm,
so
mm-hmm,
and in the '80s, so
mm-hmm.
I don't want to say that it wasn't racist because there was certainly racism, systemic racism in
I'm about to
law
say
enforcement.
Bloomberg
And
has
well, but
stopping
this
freaks
is
going on.
yeah, no, but this is like way
Sure,
before
sure.
Bloomberg. This is during like David Dinkins when we had a black
Mm-hmm,
mayor and
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
all of that stuff. And so now there was racism, but I think where I grew up, it was so diverse
mm-hmm,
that I didn't have the sense of systemic racism when I was a kid.
mm-hmm,
I got the sense that racism was kind of an individual thing. Some people are just racist, most people are not. It's not something you normally have to deal with. It
mm-hmm,
wasn't until I went to the South where I like discovered
mm-hmm,
racism was
mm-hmm,
like embedded into systems and
mm-hmm.
and I think it's a combination of that and also I'm not exactly the darkest person in the world. I'm a little melanin challenged,
What?
and
Say it
but
ain't so, Bryce.
I think that I still, I'm not white passing. I still
Yeah.
present obviously as a person of color. Some people might question how black are you, what percentage, whatever, but they know I've got black. I'm black enough to be not white,
Yeah.
and so but in the South, it was when I was growing up, you had to be one or the other,
Yeah.
And so if you're not white passing, you're black.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I learned very quick. Okay, I'm black. That's fine. And I grew up with that as part of my family. But I grew up constantly people asking me what I am or what I'm mixed with, or
Hmm.
that was a question I had to deal with. And also I think that being in white spaces as someone who is mixed or perceived as less threatening,
Mm.
I've been privy to conversations that that white people might not have around other black people.
Like me.
Uncomfortable
Yeah,
conversations.
like me.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, and there's
Hmm.
people in my family who are much lighter than me,
Mm.
resembling the gentleman there.
Yeah.
It's a similar story too. They've always been light skinned because they just kept. I guess that was advantageous in the past for if you were passing, but they still identify as black.
Hmm.
But my mom's best friend she's very fair skinned, but she's been in spaces with white people where they just freely use the N word thinking that,
Mm.
we're
Mm.
all, hey, it's safe to say that here,
Right.
and she's black,
Yeah.
so it's a very different kind of experience. I think that it's not equal to the darker your skin is. I think the more difficult it is in our society.
Yeah.
So I don't want to make it equal. I don't want to say being light skin is equal to being dark skin in America. It's not. There is light skin privilege,
Sure.
but there's also those unique experiences like what this gentleman probably is privy to. He probably hears a lot of racist stuff that you and I probably wouldn't even imagine. We probably would
Mhm.
imagine it, but we wouldn't experience it because they don't want to talk like that in front of us.
Sure, sure. It's interesting when I talk to people who happen to be biracial, who are in those spaces where if you are around white people per se, you get the I'm not as threatening as somebody who may be darker, right?
Yeah,
Um, I think of what the um the person that happens to occupy the Oval Office said about Byron Donaldson, Byron Donalds, when they were at a campaign rally uh, during the 2024 presidential election. And he was introducing Byron to talk and say words on his behalf. And he said about him, there, he's a good one, very smart. Some
yeah.
are smart, and some are smart and some are not smart, not so much. He's a smart one, right? So it's also that whole dog whistle of basically like rating intelligence and and good old boy ishness according to the person who happens to be more loyal than not, right? And and I think that, and I'm not to say it is not necessarily to say this concerning biracial people because everyone is different. Of course, like just like any makeup of people who happen to be in a race or a human group, not it's not a monolith, right?
Yeah.
But I believe that it's more so the perception that if you are a person who happens to be lighter, you
Mhm.
have more, a presentation that is adjacent to white, then you will have the portions of you that makes you less threatening, maybe even smarter, maybe even to the point where you will be more loyal to whiteness versus not. Of
Mhm.
course, like this is not, and as I stated before, this is not true of everyone. But would I would just think just from how we have a tendency to default to certain things because of how we grow up, our environment, etc.
Mhm.
This is like a thought pattern that maybe more people than not have. What do you think about that?
Well, I would say that it depends. And what I
Hmm.
mean by that is it depends on how advantageous it is to them at that time.
Mm.
In other words, you mentioned the guy in the White House, right?
Yeah, that guy.
Um, from his perspective, if someone appears to be loyal to him,
Yeah.
because that's his test for everybody,
Oh yeah.
loyalty to him, right? How much of a sycophant you are. Then he gives you credit, and whatever credit that could be. And if you happen to be black,
Hmm.
then it's intelligence credit or
Hmm.
whatever. I don't think that he necessarily cares how light or dark the black person is. It's more how much of a sycophant they are to him.
Sure.
And then he's going to say they're one of the good ones. And
Hmm.
the reason I put it that way is because when it's advantageous to him, he'll deny someone's blackness,
Mm.
like Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
She's light skinned, she's biracial. She very clearly identifies as black, but
Hmm.
he'll say something like, I didn't even know that she was black, or she just decided to become black one day. And who knows? Who knows if she's even black? I don't know. I don't see a black
Do
woman,
you
you
know? I
know.
know. I know. She was just black one day, and all of a sudden she's black. Yes, I
Yeah. And
remember that.
so magically in that narrative, if the person is identifying as black, but they're a rival of you, then you deny their blackness.
Hmm.
It's something. Even President Obama, when he was in the office, he was, most people I think fairly recognize him as the first black president. He
Hmm.
presents as black. He has a black family. He's spoken in black spaces, and so most people don't have a problem with him being black. He is in fact biracial.
Right.
But he's black presenting and identifies as black.
Hmm.
It's only when someone wants to deny his success or his presidency that they'll, when they want to deny the history of the fact that he's the first black president, they'll say, well, he's not the first black president. He's biracial.
Yeah.
He's not even really black. He's not
Yeah.
even he's not even African American. His father's
Yeah.
from Africa.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so then all of a sudden he's not black. When black people are doing something good, if you can deny them being black,
Hmm.
then it's like we've never even had a black president before because he wasn't even really black.
Hmm.
I when I was a kid, I remember Mariah Carey, the singer.
Yeah.
She's very white, or she, at least at the time they were trying to make her white presenting. She's very fair skinned. She's passing,
Right.
um, but I knew that she was black from the beginning,
Mm.
mostly because intuitively her voice, she just sounded like she was. And then when I heard her speak, and then later in the year she started suggesting it,
Hmm.
but I was like, yeah, that makes sense to me. But other people, no, she's not black, she's a white singer. where
Hmm.
did where did you get that from? That's not what she said. so
No, it's not what she said. Yeah.
so
It's.
yeah, people will take away the blackness when they don't. Racists, I should say, not people.
Hmm.
Racists will deny blackness when it's convenient to them.
Yeah. And I think that that's what these ideas come from. This is where these ideas come from, especially when we're having conversation about who is black enough, right?
Yeah.
Going back to that whole idea, well, the whole conversation around Kamala
Mhm.
and how you even heard black people say she's not black, right?
Yeah, that's the disappointing part when black people start echoing
Yeah,
that sort of thing. So this is the
yeah,
colorism side of it where,
yeah.
you
It's
know,
it's colorism and also repeating white supremacist rhetoric. It
yeah.
it really is. And but going back to the point where oh she can't be black and a woman and
Hmm.
actually had a fairly successful political career.
Right.
Remember, like this whole idea and notion, and I even heard black people say it too about her being a DEI hire. And I'm like, okay, first off, when I hear any person use it in that a DEI in that vernacular, you really don't
Hmm.
know what DEI is.
No, no, they don't.
You don't.
That's just like CRT. It's just
Yeah.
another acronym that they
Hmm.
think is, they don't even know what woke means. I was
No,
about to say another
no,
acronym that
no.
they think is woke, but they don't even
Yeah,
know what
yeah.
that
They
means.
don't even
So
know that. Yeah, you're
yeah,
using these. You throw out these terms, and you
they're
have no.
buzzwords.
Yeah, they exactly. They're and it's crazy how like they've been taken into these spaces and being weaponized and
Mhm.
oftentimes against marginalized people. But when I would listen to people talk about Kamala, especially with her running for president, like
Mhm.
when she ran the first time, um, some black people would always mention about how she had that conversation. I think it was with the griot about reparations, and she said, "I'm not just going to sit here and say I'm just going to do something just for black people. No,
Mhm.
because she was talking about this bill that she wanted to get passed called the Lift Act, where it would basically help a plethora of people who happen to be impoverished out of poverty or give them a break in some shape, way, or form.
Right.
Um, But she was also a person who actually supported reparations. Like, and she said she would support reparations. She said that she would even sign HR 40 if it came to her on her desk, you know.
Hmm.
And even though, like, I would even say that, I mean, if we going through the minutia about the bill itself of HR 40, like, again, that's a different show. I don't particularly care for it so much, but I do have to admit that that's the only bill so far that has gone through Congress in some shape, way, or form that even addresses um, reparations for slavery in the first place, right? So, so this is a person who still says that, she supports this bill, but she gets this whole notion about she's not black because her mother's Indian,
Yeah, that
or
doesn't make
she,
any sense.
yeah, she's not black because she doesn't have she doesn't have a super close relationship with her father, who is a black man.
Yeah.
And then you had like people like Candace Owens who were talk about how he really wasn't black because they had like some Irish lineage within the area where he came from in Jamaica. And I said, yeah, there's a lot of people that came from Ireland that lived in Jamaica, but a lot of them intermixed with black people who were there. And you do know that over 90% of that island is black, right? You do know that, right?
Well, you
Demographically, it
can't.
is.
Yeah, you can't really take the words of. First of all, Candace Owens is a paid right wing commentary, or at
Sure,
least she was. She's. I don't know no one knows what she is now because she's been unceremoniously removed from
sure,
her
sure.
position from
Yes,
the Ben Shapiro.
yes. Mm-hmm.
They fired her because she started speaking out against Israel, I guess.
Yeah,
So now that she's no longer a what's the word that they use now? It's not a poser, but a grifter, I think is the
yeah.
term. Now that she's not a paid right wing grifter anymore, and she's speaking more from the anti-Israel. She's we don't really know what she really believes. She's just in it for the money,
At
So
this
I don't take her
point,
seriously.
she's more so trying to just tear down all of TPUSA and Erica Kirk. That's her thing
Yeah,
now, right?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Hmm.
but I don't take her words as the gospel about anything,
No one
especially when she
should.
was employed, by the right wing think tanks who don't know what they're talking about or care. I
Right.
think that anyone who grows up in Oakland, California, and went through busing desegregation because they lived in the black part of town and they had to be bused to a school to force integration.
Right.
I mean, you could say they're not black, but the history of what they lived through kind of disproves it, shows that they lived the black experience.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of Kamala Harris, by the way, I should say. Just to be clear, for anyone who's like, oh, these guys they worship Kamala Harris. I don't. I think
Yeah.
that there's a lot of problems I have with her politics
Yeah.
and with most people in her political lane.
Sure.
Having said that, she's a black woman by
Yeah.
every relevant, metric that we have in this country that we've been using for decades.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you want to take away, but again, they don't want successful black people.
Yeah.
They
I mean,
that's
yeah. And
why
I
they
mean,
don't want her to be black.
exactly. I mean, like I said, listen, I can point out issues that I have with a bunch of different politicians, past, present, and possibly even future, right?
Yeah,
Kamala was one. I had issues with some of Obama's policies. Regardless of that,
yeah,
I think that unfortunately, like this getting back to this whole conversation about being black enough and things of that nature, that we are not able to really have those succinct conversations about policy
right,
because we're too stuck on how people are presenting themselves racially. And I don't and I mean this is something of course that has been very foundational of America, full stop, right? It's we unfortunately, like, when I think about this young man, Mr. Cody Gould, who is talking about his experience and talking about why, I even though I'm presenting this way,
Mm.
I still have a very rich history concerning Blackness and having Black family members and some of their contributions that they had to America, even though it was difficult for them to do because they were Black. Things that should be more so of a, okay, that's great, Cody, and I'm not about to sit up here and judge you just because you happen to look more white to me. But
Mm.
but unfortunately, that's always going to be the thing because we're still stuck on what we see. And I think it's also disingenuous when I would hear people, especially say that whole thing about I don't see color. Like Tony Laren said that to Trevor Noah when she was on the Daily Show years ago. And I was like, girl, yes, you do.
Mm.
Like,
Yeah.
yes, you do. We all do. We can't help but, do that. Like, I think Anna Kasparian tried to say the same thing. Like, no, we all see color. And you
Yeah.
prejudge based on what you see. And if it doesn't, and sometimes we even start to glitch if what we see versus what it is starts
Hmm.
to kind of like go against the grain. We start to implore our cognitive dissonance to say, oh well, you can't be this, you can't be that, because this is how I have a perception of Black people. And but I see that you speak very intelligent. You are an accomplished person. You have like a really, wonderful education, whatever it is. Like,
Hmm.
you got a couple dollars in the bank, whatever. That's not what Blackness is. And therefore, since you go against that, you're not Black enough. And I mean,
I
yeah.
Yeah, well, so on the first point you made about people talking about how I don't see blackness,
Hmm.
I personally, I don't know how it's been for you. I personally have never met or had any interaction with a person of a black person who's ever said that before. I've
Hmm.
only ever heard that from white people
Yeah, that's what I mean.
because it's a very privileged thing to say
Yeah.
because black people have never had the luxury of saying anything as absurd as I don't see color.
Yeah.
Okay, you could say that if you want to, but other people see your color,
Hello.
you
And
know?
treat you accordingly.
Yeah, so that's nobody no, I don't know. I'm not going to say nobody. I'm never going to say never. Maybe there's some black person who was adopted and raised by a white family in rural Kansas
Hmm.
who grew up hearing, "Oh, we don't see color."
Hmm.
I think you've done that kid a disservice if that's the case,
Yeah.
because the police see his color, you know?
Right. Right.
So it's a very stupid thing to say, but it's a very privileged thing to say.
Hmm.
And Anna Kasparian is just lying if she's saying that, because I've seen segments where she's talking about WNBA players and she misidentified a black WNBA player as a white woman because she's very light skinned, and even Jink had to tell it no, she's black, she's just really light skinned, and she's looking. So clearly, you thought this person was white. You can say that, so you can see color.
Yeah.
The whole segment is on a white woman saying something about a black woman in the WNBA. You guys are talking about it. So clearly you see color. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you couldn't do a story like that. It's a ridiculous thing to say. I think some people have gotten to this mindset where they're taught that you should act as if color doesn't exist.
Hmm.
And then they've translated that in their mind as, well, I don't see color. But that's not helpful in the discussion. That doesn't help get us past racism. All it's doing is denying people's experience.
Right.
If you say you don't see color, basically you're pretending that I have equal privilege to a white person, and that's not my experience.
Right.
So
And nor is
that's
it,
not helpful.
and it's not factual to a bunch of us that are out here as far as like, how we are presenting and how we live in America. I mean, like
Yeah,
we can look at data sets and see that that's not the case, that we're not equal. I mean, like it,
right.
it would be nice, but we're not.
Uh, Yeah, and it's not, it's never been that way in the history of
Yeah.
this country. If you say you don't see color, then you also don't see, you never learned the history of the United States either, which
Right.
which makes me question your IQ. Did you go to school? Because the country was founded on black slavery,
It
it
really
was
was.
built by black slaves,
Yep.
we fought a war. Like, what do you know about color
Yeah.
at all? So that's why I can't take that seriously.
Yeah. I think that that's one of our issues as a society is that we want to whitewash history so badly, or even just want to just like put it in a cave, put the rock on it, and never
Mhm.
see it again. I just even think about like all the different steps that was even taken by the administration with what was it? It was an executive order uh, called the History and Sanity Act or something to that effect. One moment,
Well, let me
yes.
throw a monkey wrench into that because you said I think words to the effect of we as a society
Mm,
want to whitewash history. I think racist conservatives want to whitewash history, you know.
mhm,
But it's even when you're talking about them, they want to whitewash and erase the history they don't like.
mm,
They have no problem preserving the history that they do
mhm.
like Confederate monuments
Right.
and symbols of Black oppression. They don't
Hmm.
have a problem. In fact, they will attack you for suggesting that we get rid of that history. That's their heritage. That's
Yeah.
their culture. You know,
Hmm.
so they want the racist history from their perspective. They just don't want it from the perspective of the victims or their descendants.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah. Totally.
yeah,
Totally.
they don't want
Yeah.
you learning about critical race theory, which teaches about systemic racism and institutionalized racism and the history of that. They just want the reminders that they used to be in charge.
Yeah, well, it's the same thing about like how there was this whole narrative based from that came from the Daughters of the Confederacy after world I'm not World War II, good grief.
The Civil
After the
War.
Civil War,
Yeah.
yeah, was fought concerning the Great Lost Cause and how they wanted to, come up with a different narrative concerning what the South was and how, well, we were a genial society and the black people love being with us. We treated them like family and everybody just got along. We drank lemonade, we sang songs,
Yeah.
and it was
Yeah.
we picked flowers in the fields. It was a very lovely time, and I was like,
Really good with
oh,
the accent, by the
yeah,
way.
well, hey, half my family's from the South, so there you go.
Okay. There you go. Yeah.
I mean, but like, but this is, but of course, like this, when I say we, because like I don't separate myself from like being an American, like, but I definitely have no problem with saying like right wing conservatism
Mhm.
has set itself as a fetter around truth when it comes to history in the United States to the point where we want to bastardize it and we don't even teach it properly to the generations afterwards. So they have a very warped idea and sense of color, of race, of if privilege exists or not. Like these are things that still come up to this day, and it's kind of like, duh, it does exist, and
Yeah.
and and you and here's the thing: if we wanted to just be honest about it, depending on where you fall on this racial line, would a lot of times determine what you do and what you don't know. And even in some cases, how you will react to these conversations because it wasn't something that you were privy to as time went on. I mean, like I think of um and I keep on going back to this administration because it's like the most recent examples that we have, but I'm pretty sure that we can go back to more as times passed. When asked if this is the president run candidate at the time, 2024,
Mhm.
on Fox News, Fox and Friends in the morning, was asked if there was a school in a very liberal area of California that was teaching that indigenous people were slain and genocided. Black people were taken from the West African coast and brought here as slaves to build the country, and basically Europeans have come to America to colonize it for their own resources and and created marginalized groups, would you, and I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, how would you respond to that? And the guy couldn't even get the full sentence out before the now president said, we will not fund them. We are not
Yeah.
going to send money to those schools. And and I mean, like, I've had um, seen different examples of people who would get their kids in these history curriculums where,
Mhm.
like, slavery is completely, taught in a total different manner. Like, sometimes they may even take, like, the PragerU approach about, well,
They liked
slavery.
being slaves. It
Yeah,
was
either, yeah,
better.
it was better.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
didn't want to be in that primitive area in Africa. Like, we civilized these people, right? Or, or whatever the hell did they come up with. I mean, like, these are, and unfortunately, and as much as, like, I would love for us to be able to get past this, colorism and racial identities in America. I would love that, because, like, the only thing that they have really done, like, I mean, like, I embrace my race. I'm proud to be a Black woman. I really
Mhm.
am. But at the same time, I also understand the struggles that are completely artificial that I would face because I'm a Black woman.
Right.
And the same, and the same thing, like, and I have a Black son, and I think about some of the struggles that he's going to encounter as time goes on, because we still have not learned how to get past these different systems and organizations and all these different things in order for us to have a more just and equitable society.
Well, that's by design, Cynthia.
Sure.
You say we haven't learned how to get past it, but again, they don't want us to learn.
Yeah.
The president you were just talking about said he would not fund schools that teach history. That's what
Yeah.
I heard,
Yeah.
because they don't want people knowing history, you know?
Exactly.
They don't want white people knowing history.
Right.
And the consequences of that is, if they're not going to fund white schools that teach history, do you think they're going to fund inner city Black schools?
Not at
Whatever.
all. Not
They're
at
even
all.
less. They're even lower funded.
Exactly.
Um, it all has to go back to education. People who and I'm not saying this to disparage anyone. Not everybody can afford to go to college. Unfortunately, it should be free, but it's
True.
not, right? It's
Right.
a very, you have to come out of pocket and then go into debt for the rest of your life. The average person does. I was fortunate to be able to go to school and have my school paid for. I served in the military, right?
Right.
So socialism, the type of socialism we have available in this country
Is
through service
oy
paid for my
vey.
schooling. So I
Yeah, yeah,
got
yeah.
school,
Yeah, yeah,
I,
yeah.
I have a master's degree. So I have the privilege of having learned history, of learning what critical theory in general is,
Mhm.
including critical race theory,
Mhm.
learning, all of the institutionalized racism, where it came from, slavery. By the way, American history, just something as simple as American history. Yes, I took that in high school, but as you said, it was very watered down.
Yeah.
How much did I learn about slavery when I was a kid in high school? I got the watered down version
Yeah.
that, they tell you, yeah, they went and they took people as slaves, and then we fought a war. They don't tell you anything about the conditions of slavery, how long it lasted, the fact that people were raped, the different, the Trail of Tears, which you alluded to a little while ago. I didn't learn about that when I was in high school. I learned about that in college.
Yeah.
That should be something that people learn in high school,
Yeah.
or college should be free, one or the other. But the
I
point is, they don't want people to know.
I learned a lot of that stuff as an adult.
Me too.
Yeah.
I,
I mean, like, outside of college.
my first real hint of what slavery was like was from watching movies.
Mm.
Glory and Amistad taught me about slavery more than any
Yeah.
school lessons up to that point, and that's
Listen,
sad.
I still get chills thinking about when Jaimin Hansu got up during the trial and said, "Give us
Give
free."
us this free. Yeah.
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 Um,
It
but
yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that we shouldn't have to depend on Steven Spielberg
Yeah.
or Hollywood to
Hmm.
t- to tell us a version of history, because there's more to it than even what they show.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're giving us more than what school gave us, that's sad. And that's when I was a kid. I don't know what they're teaching now. I don't even know if they mention the word slavery in history books
And
now.
I'm fortunate enough that like my son is in a school where it's predominantly African Americans. The teachers are African American, and so the curriculum that he gets is very much so reflective of that. And then also very um they're very involved with making was teaching the children pride in their identities and who they are, and that makes me makes my heart this a flutter, right? But
Yeah.
I also know that this is not the narrative of every school, even though I'm in a very woke city, right? So, and I even know that like even I went to predominantly African American schools growing
Mhm.
up, but and the teachers did what they could to be more inclusive when it came to the curriculum, especially teaching about history and also like black contribution to American society. But there was still a lot that was left out that I did not learn until, as you said, like I watched a movie that piqued my interest that made me want to read books,
Yeah.
and then I think that I learned more about like I think that like one of the bigger books that really got me interested in learning even more about like f- form the formation um of America, and especially when it came to black folk being here, is stamped from the beginning by Ibram X Kendi. Is it Ibram X Kendi? I always get his X in the wrong place. It's
Understandable.
yeah, I get his it's either at the end of Kendi or before it. But he he was inspired to write the book when Trump won his presidency back in 2016. And and he and I was listening to an NPR podcast when they were interviewing him about it. And I was like, "Oh wow. That sounds like a very interesting book. I want to read it." And I ended up getting it and I read it. And
Mhm.
I mean, there was just a lot of different things that I just did not know, Bryce.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Because I'm curious. I'm
Yeah.
going to give you my answer to the question after, but I just want to know, we're talking about the learning of history.
Hmm.
How old were you approximately when you first heard the term redlining or when you first learned about redlining?
Oh, I can tell you. In my 30s.
Yeah, same here.
Hmm.
So I was in my 30s the first time I ever heard that, which proves that that's not something that they taught us in school.
Right.
And that's kind of an important thing
Yeah.
because the narrative in the right wing conservative zeitgeist is that Black people shouldn't be still talking about slavery. Slavery is over. Jim Crow's over.
Hmm.
Pick yourself up by your bootstraps. And why are you
Hmm.
still blaming everything on white people?
Right.
The problem is Black people. That's the narrative they want to run with
Hmm.
because they don't know what redlining is either.
Right.
And for since we're talking about it, redlining, I might as well say was this process where banks and insurance companies would look at a map and they would draw a line around areas that were considered uninsurable or low income, and usually they corresponded to where Black people lived. Sometimes it would be like European immigrants, maybe like Italians at one point or Eastern Europeans, basically low class people, right?
Hmm.
And so they have physical maps that they would draw a red line around and say, don't give
Don't
insurance
land here and don't
don't lend
insure
here
here.
and don't
Hmm.
insure in these places because they're not insurable.
Right.
And that is pretty much what kept Black people from uh, accruing and passing on generational wealth for years and years and years.
Hmm.
This is not during slavery. This
Right.
is not even during Jim Crow.
Right.
This didn't end until the 70s,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
a lot of us were alive in the
Yeah.
70s. And so when people say, why are Black people still talking about slavery and Jim Crow and all this? They have equal rights. Civil Rights Act of 1964. Well, redlining didn't end in 1964. It
Right.
didn't end in 1968 with the Voting Rights Act either.
No, it didn't.
It ended in the 70s. And because most of the people are from the 70s are still alive, guess what? They didn't have any wealth because of that, you know? So
Right.
any wealth that Black people would have began to accrue had to start at the very least in the 80s. But
Right.
there's a problem with that. You come from a poor community, schools are not very well funded in those communities. So you don't have the education opportunities. You don't have the money to go to school. You have no money to pass on to the next generation.
Hmm.
Why are Black people still a higher percentage below the poverty line?
Yep.
All of this feeds into, we don't have boots.
Yeah.
We never had boots. So, and now in the 80s, from the 80s on, nobody can afford to go to college either. So
It's what Dr. King said. He said it's a cruel jest to tell a bootless man to strap himself up by his own bootstraps. I mean,
yes,
yeah,
I
and
should
I
have said
mean,
I should have said that. I should have said that's not me. That's Dr. King. I'm
yeah.
stealing, obviously.
No,
Yeah.
it's okay, and it's for a good cause.
Yeah.
I mean, but yeah, I mean, like these are things that are like why we still have these conversations about it, about the connectiveness of slavery to now, because like it wasn't that slavery ended in 1865 and then all of a sudden like Black people got equal rights and then we was good to go and we could do whatever white people did, yada yada yada. Bob's your uncle. Woo! That did not happen. You know,
No,
I
it
think
did
the
not.
most progressive time that we had was that 7 years of Reconstruction, and how during that time period, first you had like a little bit of progress, especially when it came to representation in Congress. And then when Reconstruction was over, they pulled back the Union Army from the South, and then everything went back to worse. You know, I,
Yeah,
I,
you had the KKK come up.
yeah,
You had
yeah,
the burning of Black Wall Street. Every
yeah,
time Black
yeah.
people started to come
That
up.
was that was just in the 1920s. That wasn't even the
Yeah.
South. That was in Oklahoma for.
Is Oklahoma? I don't know if that's the South or not.
No,
I
it's not.
Is it not Oklahoma's not the South? Okay.
No, it's not the
Um,
South. I mean, they act very Southern, but it's not. It's
mhm.
it was like during that time period where there were people who were pushing towards moving west because they wanted to claim a lot of that territory that was
Right.
up because of the Homestead Act of 1862. But yeah, you had one man who was an ex-slave that bought property in the Greenwood district of Tulsa, who started to sell it to other ex-slaves who were coming up, and they were able to actually make a life for themselves. They had banks, they had schools, they had doctors' offices, they had insurance companies. They were able to support themselves as a township, and just because of one incident with an elevator operator and a white woman, then all of a sudden, well, it wasn't all of a sudden, but it was a buildup of a mob of white people that came and burned down that town. They were even throwing, they were doing, I think of like, what happened in 2001 with the towers, and
Mhm.
how like flames and how planes were flying into the Twin Towers in New York. They did that in Tulsa.
The Tulsa riots is something else that I didn't learn about when I was in high school.
No,
That
I
comes
didn't either.
later. And so it all goes back to education for me.
Yeah,
People have to learn this stuff. And
yeah.
when powers that be don't want history taught,
Hmm.
you're never going to get rid of racism
No,
unless you teach history. The first step to overcoming a problem is recognizing that one exists, and
exactly.
those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. Right. And
Exactly.
so when you talk about how come we can't get past racism, well, it's because we don't want to teach history and we keep, electing people that threaten to take funding away from
Yeah.
anyone who even talks about race.
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so yeah, and just to kind of bring it back to the whole colorism thing, this is something that is problematic for Black people as well, not knowing the history of race in the country, because colorism within the Black community is um, is fed from that. It's derived
Yeah.
from that. It's an extension of white supremacy,
Oh
and
yeah.
Black people don't even realize that they're doing it.
Mhm.
When you say that, first of all, there's two sides of it. When some light skinned person thinks that they're better because they're light skinned,
Mhm.
I don't know how you feel about Chris Brown, the singer. I know a lot of people who like him. I don't like him, and I think, I
I
mean,
don't either.
his music is okay or whatever, but he's
Yeah.
clearly doesn't like black. He doesn't like dark skinned people, and
Mhm.
he's very proud of being light skinned. I don't
Mhm.
even think he's that light skinned, but whatever. He he's into light skinned girls, and he's proud of being light skinned, and he promotes this idea that this is something to be proud to be. You know,
On top of being
and
misogynist, and on top of also being a
oh
woman
yeah, yeah.
hater, all yeah,
He's
yeah,
got many other problems
he's
as a
terrible.
person.
Yeah, he's terrible. Yeah, go
But this he has a lot of fans and
yeah.
people and a lot of influence, and
Mhm.
people see that uh, that's something that he's making sense. That he ought to be proud of that and not condemned for it as being ignorant.
Mhm.
So that's the one problem with colorism. The other part is people who are very light skinned or even white passing denying their blackness, because their
Yeah.
blackness may not be equal to yours in terms of their lived experience, but it doesn't mean that they're equal to white people either, and so
Yeah.
we have to realize that there's nuance, and the definition of black is subjective. It's
Yeah.
not it's not there's no objective definition to where anyone can say, you can ask a million black people in America, who is black, what qualifies someone to be black, and they'll give you a million different
Different
answers.
answers. Yeah, exactly. And then you also got to think about this too. I think that Joyce DeGride wrote the book Post Traumatic Slave Disorder. And
I like that.
yeah, and she was basically just talking about the trauma of the Black experience that has been built up over the centuries that a lot of us still possess, and it's because we again don't we as Black people, and I would even say this for people who are biracial or even multicultural or multi-ethnic, who have and any type of attachment to Blackness at all, there's
Mhm.
still a collective trauma that we have endured as people, since our progenitors came over from ships from the western coast in Central Africa, and it's like through the systems that we endure, we're
Mhm.
still that trauma is still poked, prodded, and also re um, reinvested in us, and it affects the way that we show up, how we talk, and even like how we would even fall, depending on whether, like, if we're looking at political ideology as well. I remember having conversations with people who I used to do reparations advocacy with, and then they all took a very weird turn, Bryce. All of a sudden, like,
Were they white, black,
no, they were black,
both?
black,
Okay.
yeah, black, black men who, at first, like, we were, on on the beaten path all together, like, we're trying to achieve, equity for Black people
Mhm.
through reparations, and then, like, of course, like, how that would show up, like, there was arguments and all that other stuff, yada yada yada. But anytime that you do advocacy work, history has always taught us that, like, not everybody's going to be on the same page. Everybody has their own ideas about how things are supposed to look. Regardless,
Right.
there the turn that happened is that, like, a lot of them who I knew started to embrace the manosphere. And with the manosphere comes white supremacist rhetoric. But I don't necessarily think that they really understood that.
No, they don't. Because it
No,
probably comes from religion too. I mean,
most
I don't mean to reduce everything down to religious indoctrination,
I'm
but
not even going to try to steel man that argument. Go
the,
ahead.
the reality of the situation is Black people in America are predominantly Christian,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a minority that's Muslim,
Mm-hmm.
but
About 2%.
very few are non-religious, you
Right.
know,
Mm-hmm.
and whichever religion they fall under here, and whichever denomination of that,
Mm-hmm.
they're all misogynistic. They're
And
all
even
based on misogyny.
and even to your point, I mean, because like, there was a couple of people who happened to kind of fall into that, and they were atheists. I mean, but like I think about, even though like I hate to invoke his name just because like he turned out to be terrible too, Richard Dawkins, who also talked about cultural Christianity, even though you may
Yeah,
not necessarily believe in a god or gods, there's
right.
still this culture of it, and all the stuff, all the baggage that comes with that indoctrination as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, and
The irony when
yeah,
he talks about it, he's talking about it as if it's a good thing,
yeah,
which is why he's a POS. Because
exactly.
it's not a good thing, but he
No, it's
speaks
not.
about it as if it's a good thing. And you're
Hmm.
right. That's exactly the same phenomenon where you mentioned, yeah, there are some non religious people in the Black community, but they grew up in that religious zeitgeist. If somebody is Black in America and they're an atheist or an agnostic or non religious or whatever,
Hmm.
99% of the time it's because they deconstructed out of Christianity
Yeah,
or Islam or whatever religion they came from. They
they
didn't
de-
just grow up
they deconstruct.
atheist.
Yeah, they deconstructed out of a belief system.
Right. And that belief system probably said the man is the head of the household. Women are not to teach in church. They're not to have authority over men. The woman is the weaker vessel. Eve sinned, and all this nonsense.
Right.
Right. They grew up with that.
Yeah.
This is why a lot of them didn't vote for Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
It wasn't because of her politics or
Mhm.
because she wasn't Black or was Black or whatever. It's because she's a woman.
Yeah.
They don't think a woman should be in
To be in
charge. You know?
charge. Yeah. And
We
I
have
know that.
rappers saying that. You know,
Yeah.
Ti said that when Hillary Clinton was running against Donald Trump. I don't
Right.
think a woman can be president. She has hormones. She might start a war.
Right.
As if all wars haven't been started by
By
men.
men.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and especially like sometimes when I was starting to like have these discourses with these people concerning their proclivity to manosphere bullshit, I'm talking with them, and I'm asking them questions of like, well, why do you feel that way, or why do you feel that she is not going to that she shouldn't be president, or what have you, and it was never about policy.
No,
No,
it
I mean,
never is
it
usually.
never is. It was all, it was always about, oh, she's not black and she's a woman. She has hormones. She's going to start World War III because she's going to press the button on the nuclear codes, and then all of us are going to be blown up to hell.
Yeah.
Fast forward March 2026, where are we at right now? But I digress.
Most Black people involved in politics in our country, unfortunately, are not progressives.
Mm-mm.
I want them to be progressives. They
Mhm.
should be progressives, but they're
Mhm.
not. They're liberals, most of them.
Yeah.
And when I say liberal, I mean socially liberal on most issues,
Hmm.
but center right on other issues,
Oh yeah.
you know, like
Yeah.
religion
Yeah.
and women
Exactly.
and authority
Yeah.
and tradition
And
and
hierarchy and how that shows up as well.
and LGBTQ
QI.
people, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yep.
that's something that they don't necessarily align to progressivism. The people who tend to be progressive in the country are young, highly educated white people,
Mm-hmm.
and you know and you can look at just voting demographics. Look in primaries, look in Democratic primaries. Who did Black people vote for? Did they vote for The progressive candidate, or did they vote for Joe Biden?
Mm-hmm.
They voted for Joe Biden
They voted for Joe
because Joe
Biden. Yeah.
Biden speaks in black churches and he says, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black, you know?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. And
so
just and I just like to say, just out of spite, I did not vote for Joe Biden because he said that.
there you go. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not,
Out of
look, I don't, I voted in general elections. I'll just put this out there. And once we get to the general election,
hmm
from 2016 forward, I've
hmm
always voted for the Democrat.
Yeah.
And but that is a lesser of two evils vote.
Yeah.
And primaries, I've never voted for the person who was the Democratic candidate. I always voted for their opponent, which
Yeah.
was the progressive candidate. But there's
Yeah.
not enough of us who do that. There's not enough black people who do that, you know.
Yeah.
And we really should.
Yeah.
Black people need to learn why Bernie Sanders was the correct choice over Hillary Clinton, you
hmm
know? Because
Yeah.
you definitely weren't going to vote for Hillary Clinton in the general election because she's a woman,
Yeah.
but you didn't vote for Bernie Sanders because he didn't talk about black issue or issues that you think were black issues, you know? Uh, so yeah, there's a lot of education that needs to happen in the black community away from conservatism.
Carter G. Woodson said it the best: the miseducation of the Negro. And a lot of us are still, and I mean, just like to just bring it back to the original conversation about,
Yeah, yeah.
being black enough. A lot of us have been, um, I don't even want to say, well, brainwashed in a Manchurian candidate way because of, a very bastardized version of history, and how we happen to, you know come here, be involved here, um and and a lot of us are still very much so, um involved in a certain way to basically prop up white supremacy, because we are still very much so involved with how how this society has been formed, to the point where we start to believe that this is right, because it's
Yeah.
always either it's always been this way, or I know nothing else, and also because of this overt attack against education, and especially when it comes to folk within our community, so that we can stay ignorant and not demand better.
Keeping us ignorant and uneducated, that's one tool that conservative, white, Christian, nationalist, Republican, whatever you want to put everyone on the MAGA in the MAGA world,
In
and
the
really
MAGA
not
world.
even MAGA, just I would say from center left to the far right.
Yeah.
Education is one tool or lack thereof, and the other is keeping us divided. You
Yeah.
know, because when we're fighting amongst each other, we have competing interests. Keeping black men's interests different from black women's.
Yeah.
Keeping black straight people against black gay people,
Yeah.
keeping the trans community marginalized even within the black community. You
hmm
know, the most marginalized community in the United States is black trans women,
Yeah.
you know,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
so
Most definitely.
which may not have the same interest as black people overall, you know,
hmm
because and so yeah, just but that's by design. They want us fighting amongst each other. We can't even get on the same page about who to vote for because we have competing interests.
Yeah. Exactly. And you also still have people who are voices within our community that are pushing interests that are not necessarily something that we should be, cleaving to, because it's against who we are as a people. It's against what would be better for us. And
Yeah.
listen, I
I
don't even.
think we need to be on the same page. All of us need to get on the same page, stop
Yeah,
divisions within ourselves.
yeah,
If someone says they're black, I don't care what you think they look like. If they grew up presenting as or identifying as or being around black culture,
hmm
don't deny their blackness because you don't think they're black enough.
yeah.
You know, that doesn't serve any of us, I don't think.
No, it doesn't. And I would even take it one step further, because have not only divisions within our own community, but we have divisions within marginalized communities. Period. And these divisions are constructed.
Yeah.
They're not something that is like inherently natural just because of all of us being human beings. And I would just say this: listen, when we all get an understanding that we do have all the same oppressor, we would do much, much better in this here United States of America.
I would say amen. I'm not religious and I don't really know what amen means anymore, but you get the stamp of approval on that one.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, Bryce, thank you so much for having this conversation with me on the Roots Matter. I think that we brought up there's a lot of that has been said that I think that is good. And I'm hoping that it's not just a conversation that's had now in this time period, that it will spark others to continue the conversation and going forward so that we can possibly create a more perfect union, or
Yeah.
or
I
am I
think
just
that no, whenever I speak on issues like this,
mhm,
one of the takeaways one of the things I want people to take away is don't believe anything just because I said something.
right.
The things that I've said and the things that you said, these are things that people who would watch this should go look up,
Oh yeah,
because I want people to learn the history. I even if you believe me at face value, you're still only getting a snippet.
right.
Fact check what I say, but do the research. Learn
Fact
the
check
history.
fact check all of us. Like, listen, one of the things that I want to be able to have happen here in this space is to provoke critical thinking and skepticism.
Here we go.
And 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 I and I will say, even though, like, usually I will say, well, like 99.99999% time I'm right. Kidding. I'm not always. I know that I'm not always right. But at the same time, we are just taking portions of history and also our own personal lived experience to actually formulate an opinion about the things that we see and
Right.
how we maneuver in life. But, dear viewer, please fact check what we say, read, pick up books, go to the library, watch other content creators that are more progressive, and that will help shape narratives based on facts and not just feelings.
There you go. Appreciate you having me on. This was fun.
Yeah. I hope you'll come back.
Oh, always. Yeah. Just give me a heads up. And yeah, I love talking about topics that people are either fearful of or just don't know. I like sharing. I'm not a knowledge hoarder.
Hmm.
I don't want to say that like I have all knowledge. I don't. Like I said, I learn stuff every day still, but I didn't start learning for real until I was an adult. And the things that I learn, I want to share with other people. And if you have something to teach me, I want to receive that. I'm going to fact check it, but I want to receive it. And if it checks out, then I've learned something new. So yes, I love having conversations like this. You said it perfectly. Critical thinking, skepticism, um, that needs to be taught as well.
Oh yeah, because it's not intuitive. And
No,
with that, I'm going to give you this. We won't say amen. I don't even
there
know
you
if I'm going to
go.
say Ashe, but I'm clapping for you right now.
Cool.
Well, guys, thank you again for tuning into another episode of The Roots Matter. And as I like to always say, well, first off, do all the things, like this video, share it to your on your different social media platforms, comment, keep the conversation going, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications so that every time that I either go live or I upload a new video, you are alerted and I beat the algorithm. And also, if you like the content on this particular channel, please consider becoming a Patreon. Becoming a patron, rather, you can go to www.patreon.com/camglamming and start to actually help us out for as little as $1 to $3 a month. $3, sir. That's all.
You do very well with those accents.
I only mimic my grandmother. And I'll tell you about that story one day. And as I like to say, everybody at the end of the show, make sure that you are staying grounded, stay hydrated, stay aware, and remember, at the end of the day, the roots matter. Take care, everybody.